Or Kia ora koutou and welcome to the third and final of our 2024 to 2034 long-term plan Facebook Lives. We've moved out from lunchtime to evening tonight and we've put ourselves in competition with 7 Sharp, Bondi Rescue and Shortland Street. But we're hoping to get a decent audience and some good questions for you. As usual, you can drop the questions in the chat below and we will try our best to answer them. We might not be able to answer everything, but we'll do our best. Today in Councillor's Corner, we've got Mayor Nigel Bowen and Councillor Michelle Pye, who are now old hands at this. It's easy.
Evening.
And in Staff Corner, we have our Emergency Management Manager, Darryn Grigsby, who's the man getting us ready for when things turn to custard.
Sure.
We've got councillors here to talk. We'd love to hear from you, so if you've got any questions or comments, just drop them in the comment box below. So we're coming to the close of the consultation period. You guys have been out and about. You've been hearing from us, you've been hearing from the public, you've been to farmers markets and meetings and everything. What's the sort of feedback been like so far?
Yeah, it's been really positive, and I think it's the opportunity. We've been wanting to talk about the LTP, but it also gives individuals that opportunity to talk about anything. And I think probably half those conversations are driving around that. I've had conversations around accessibility parks, right through to the theatres and those that are topical and in the media. So variety of stuff, but it's been really positive, and it's been a great opportunity to talk about the real challenges that council faces, sitting within our infrastructure, around those core things. What a lot of people don't know is we're the proud owner on behalf of the ratepayers of 300 odd bridges. A lot of those have a long asset life, and we're now in a moment in time for the next 30 years where we need to invest and replace and renew a lot of that asset. So it's been a great opportunity to talk about some of those challenges.
Michelle, you've got quite an in with the rural population. Do you hear much from them, or are they being stoic and not sharing their opinions?
I haven't heard too much from them, but I think once again, like Mayor Nigel says, it's a great opportunity to increase everyone's level of understanding. And there is always that rhetoric around ratepayers pay too much for their rates and don't get the services. But when you put it to them about the bridges that we own and the infrastructure needs around them and how they are mostly rural based, it kind of changes the tables a little bit. So yeah, no, it's been good getting out and about and meeting people. It's the first LTP for me, and it's surprising the range of feedback that you get. We were at the Toyka Library the other day, and I was very surprised by somebody who said we should just keep those rate rises up there. Not what I was expecting from that person, but then equally you get the feedback that the rate rises are too high. So a real range of feedback.
Do you sometimes have a notion of what people are going to come back at you, and are you sometimes surprised by that, as you said?
Yeah, well, I definitely was that day. Look, feedback is wide and varied. Yeah. Some people you'll know what feedback you'll get from them, and others, do surprise you actually.
Mm.
Yeah. Look, I think to that point, I think most people understand the challenges. It's not just us putting the rates up; it's across the country. There's those conversations around the country's infrastructure deficit. That's quite real. We need to, be reinvesting in these assets. And you might be able to speak to this, Darryn, as well. But when we lost the pier in the Rangitata, rail bridge the other day, it just sort of brings home the challenges that we have. A lot of that investment, our main trunk line that's so important for our district is, 80 odd years old, and it may not sit with local government as such, but we've got our own assets that are of a similar timeline. So, if we don't have those main trunk lines available, we don't get the basics. So, interesting stuff.
This is a good segue into emergency management, which is one of the services that the council does provide, and it's probably one of those ones that we don't think about until it comes around. So when we're not in the middle of chaos, what are you actually doing with your day?
Which is actually, I think, a really, really good question, and probably is often not understood what we actually do. So in emergency management, we talk about 4 R's: reduction, readiness, response and recovery. And response is the one that's normally visible. That's when we see people out best, and it's quite obvious when we're in response. It's less obvious when we're doing the other Rs. So we're talking about reduction, how do we reduce risk, we talk about readiness, and that's about planning, being prepared for when we need to be, and response obviously is actually getting out there and doing the doing. And then recovery, and this probably speaks a lot to your point about bridges and things. What we know is recovery is what we have to do after the event. And increasingly there's a quite focus on the fact that recovery can take years and is often the most significant part of the incident. It's probably not recognised as well as it could be.
And what are the main risks in this area, would you say?
Well, I think there's two that really come to mind, and that's obviously the weather and flood type situation. We see them on a relatively regular basis, and the recent incident's a good example that maybe didn't quite cross into that whole declared emergency threshold, but it was a significant incident, caused damage, and we spent a lot of time actually just monitoring that and keeping track of it. So those floods, the weather events, that's probably the top one. And then obviously we couldn't go through this session without talking about the alpine fault. So current estimate is 75% chance in the next 50 years that the alpine fault will rupture. That means that I might not see it in my lifetime, but my kids probably will. So I think it's a relatively sobering sort of statistic. And then there's lots of other ones that probably they're not on the radar the same, but they're quite, they're out there. There's typical tsunami type threats, I hate to say it, but a pandemic is always another option. And then probably we're seeing some risks around that global conflict, and cyber attack is another thing that actually has a bit of potential to impact on us.
Just causes of stress having to think about this sort of stuff all the time.
I think it's just about, and I think for everybody the message is the same, that we just have to be aware of this, and we've just got to know that we've got our planning right and that we're prepared for it, and the preparedness takes away some of the stress.
If there was a few things that you would ask people to do to get prepared, what would those be?
I definitely think that people need to make the time to get informed. There's lots of information on the civil defence and NEMA websites. Understand the messaging that's out there, that own the zone, so know your area, know your home, know where you work, have some plans for them. So own the zone, and then that get ready, get through message is really key. Be prepared, take the time to understand that, do some planning, talk to your family, reach out to your neighbours, connect with them.
Because in the case of an emergency, you're the one with the signature that hands power over to people like me to ask people to leave their house and things like that. I mean, does that sort of thing keep you up at night now?
It does now. I think I was only probably a month in the job, and lucky I've gone to New Mayor's School in Wellington and been informed on emergency management. I came straight back and connected with Tracy Tierney at the time, who was overseeing that part of the organisation, and it's the best thing I ever did, because 2 weeks later we had the Rangatawa flood of 2019, and it's an event which was raining on the coast, it was raining in the hills, and it's stopped the South Island and cut it in two effectively. So an event that we still haven't built back from. Are we any more resilient from now as a community than we were in 2019? I'd say no, we're not. We've got that 80-year-old infrastructure, and we've got a single lane bridge out of Aurora, so we need to keep advocating for what will become lifelines for our community. So heavy rain does keep you up at night.
You've got rural communities are probably sort of inordinately affected by heavy rain and flooding in this sort of way, but also they're seen as very self-reliant and getting on with these things. Does that preparation message still have to go through to those communities, do you think?
It absolutely does, and I think even though they may be a bit more self-sufficient, they get cut off and isolated more easily than what people do in town. I know the Rangatawa flooding that Nigel was talking about, we were severely affected from, and we had to helicopter people in and out because all the roads were cut off for animal health reasons, so that we could, and for people's safety reasons. So yes, they are probably a little bit more self-sufficient, but easily isolated.
And that one was interesting. It was raining in the hills, massive amount of water coming down the Rangatawa, but it was a sunny afternoon or sunny day, and sport was still being played in town, all those sort of things. So it didn't affect the urbanites unless they were, travelling. whereby all those same communities up and down the Rangatahi generally, or up and down our greater rivers are affected. So yeah, it's interesting where the danger lies and how different communities can prep. Question, from me is how, there's people that aren't in the position to put away, days of food, let alone weeks to be prepared for some of these things. You talk about the zone and that community response. What should we be doing around our neighbours, I guess?
Yeah, I think we certainly acknowledge that it's a challenge for some people. And so one of our messages is, for people that can make the preparedness, then actually if we know they're prepared, that means that we can focus more on other people as well. But it's definitely about reaching out, connecting with people, know your neighbours, know your whānau, sort of be able to check in. And if there are issues, then that's kind of what we do, and we can help connect people to those services that they need.
Because when the flare goes up and when we declare an emergency, and as I said, it's all going to custard, what sort of networks do you depend on out there?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things that we do on a day-to-day basis is actually make sure we've got those relationships, because they're really important. So we have relationships through into some of those community groups. We definitely have relationships into that wider health and that social sector, and then of course obviously the response agencies, FENS, police, ambulance. So building those in peacetime means it's easy to pick up the phone when you really need it.
One of the questions we're asking in the long-term plan consultation is about debt levels. We're suggesting that we raise the debt cap. Are you confident that still have enough headroom there if there was a disaster and you needed to rebuild stuff in a hurry?
Yeah, so the way I explain that, and for those that aren't aware, we've got a debt cap of 2.1, which is our self-imposed debt cap. We're proposing that over the life of the plan, we utilise headroom up to 2.5. It will go to 2.5 times our revenue. And to put that in comparison, as a home loan, you might be borrowing at 5 or 6 times your revenue. We've still got the ability to go to 2.8 times. And then if you think in the context of a major disaster, probably Cyclone Gabriel's a good one. Earthquakes, all those sort of things that we've seen across Canterbury. When the council stop, they go into emergency mode. They will rethink, their spending, and they will concentrate on delivering, very much focused on that core. It's making sure roads and bridges and, are available for people, and, that your sanitary, your water, potable water and wastewater, all those things. So I think there's just naturally a move to sort those problems as and when required.
And I guess with as part of emergency, sort of climate-driven emergency is one of those problems I have to think about, sort of building back better and building things stronger and moving stuff around. Is that climate resilience coming into your thinking when you're going into sort of deliberations like this?
Yeah, very much so. And if you look at just an example around climate effect on our water supply, we've invested significant money into the Parry pipeline of lakes. There's work done around understanding that catchment into the future. Will it be affected by climate? Those sort of things. So there's, I think in every thing we do in council, there's considerations around climate, whether it's investing in that resiliency space or when it's, you're talking about an emergency response.
Because our infrastructure is backbone of the economy, and a lot of that is based on the produce that we produce in this area. So it's important to keep that thing going, especially when we will be providing food for a great deal of the country and beyond.
Yeah, it is, and I think that came home in that Rangatahi flood when the South Island was effectively cut in half, and getting food to supermarkets locally with most of the warehouses in Christchurch, and so making sure that core infrastructure is able to be used is really key. And I'll just add to that around that whole climate change space. You won't see it as a separate line in our long-term plan, but that doesn't mean we're not doing anything around climate change in council. And we spend a lot of time with the community talking about climate change and having a lot of workshops. We've got a draft document there that's got some really good information, and so we're using that to work out what a council need to do, what do other people in the community need to do, what's a role for Venture Timaru, what's roles for individuals, and working on that. So yeah, a lot of stuff happening in that space. And we're part of the Canterbury Mural for Climate Change group that's kind of joining funds, so we get more bang for a buck when we're accessing information and doing studies. So, yeah.
I think the language changed a bit at the time you were here, because we talked about 1 in 50-year floods, and now we seem to talk about the 1 in 50-year flood we have every year.
Yeah, I mean, based on average, we see a reasonable flood every 2 years at the moment. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that's a sort of a statistical change, but it seems to be anecdotally what we're seeing. So.
What's the role of the community in this? Is there an active role that they can play in civil defence as well as that?
Yeah, look, I think first thing we've got to remember is that civil defence is all of us, and we all have a part to play, and that comes back to what I was saying about connecting with your neighbours and checking in with them. It comes back to that individual preparedness and making sure that you've done what you can to make sure that you're resilient and can get through. There's also some formal positions. We have some volunteer teams based in Temuka, Geraldine and Pleasant Point, and one here in Timaru. Always looking for new recruits for those, and so that's a really good way that people can come on board and become a really active part of that response.
Cool. We've got a few questions coming in. I did a little shout out earlier. We've got a few. I won't ask you the hard ones right this second. I'll let you have a wee bit of thinking. There's a couple about the major capital projects, as you'd imagine, so the theatre and the stadium.
Yeah.
Someone has asked us sort of, why are you taking time to reopen this after 4.5 years of it being closed, and are you putting rates up to pay for it?
Yeah, so obviously in regard to the theatre, yeah, look, it has been closed since 2019. The decision on that falls in early July. Your rates will go up, unfortunately, to and be part of the contribution to all of our facilities. It's no different than we're investing into a $30 million pipeline upgrade, a stadium, or a theatre heritage project. So we're still waiting for that to come through. My question or comment around that would be whether it's this that's delivered or it ends up being something else. We do need to have an auditorium of sorts. We need to be investing into our cultural and our arts, because those are the things that attract people. I've talked to lots of businesses lately when they're trying to attract staff. What are the important things? It's around the stadiums, it is the theatres, it's the schools, it's your hospitals, the ability to get to a doctor. So they're all part of the bigger picture around what makes a community great and attractive to people wanting to live here, for the local residents, but people wanting to move here and make that decision to be part of the Timaru community.
And you mentioned stadiums as well, so you've been meeting about R&E Park and the wider stadium. How's that project progressing?
So if you're watching the council meeting the other night, we had an interesting discussion around that. So yeah, we've got a couple of plans there that we're going to go out and get that priced up. But there's definitely really keen community support for that stadium. It's well used, and I think there's general support around the council table that that's a project that needs to go ahead.
And I think probably the key thing on those two projects is we've consulted on the stadium the last time. Theatre's been consulted on a few times now. They're sitting within the current budget, and final decisions are yet to be made on those projects. But those are projects that will be delivered in the next 3 years. So for those that have been involved in those, previously, they're in the early years of the LTP, and they are key projects for council to deliver.
Because you use some of those as, we've not had any major incident events of that type, but we do use halls and things like that you don't think of to actually house people if needed.
Yeah, that's always a really sort of tricky situation, and the best thing is to build enough resilience in that we don't get to that point. But what we've learned from some other incidents, we talk about Gabriel, is often actually the main thing people need is just a place that they can go, connect, get access to power and services and things like that. So it's not always about people put some stretchers on the floor type thing. That sort of community hub type model is something I think we'll be looking at more and more.
when disasters happen in other areas, do you take the opportunity to learn from them, and is there a sort of a body of knowledge that you gain about these things?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting point. Obviously, Gabriel is, we've had a couple of reviews come out of that. There's some really important lessons that have come out of those, and a lot of that is actually around making sure that communities are able to remain connected. You talk about with those rural communities now, easily they get isolated, and so actually I think a lot of that resilience planning is about making sure that people can remain connected as well. But there's definitely learnings that come out of any incident. We'll always look at them, we'll always take them on board. We do a lot of training, so if we talk about our council staff who contribute to our emergency operations centre, they do an amazing job of helping our response and working on that. So we've got to take the time to make sure that they're trained and working well in that space as well.
Completely off topic again, so we'll be all over the shop tonight because we've got quite a lot of questions. Someone's talking about the operational costs of community facilities, that they don't always wash their face, do they? Things like the swimming pool and the theatre and the stadium, they're always going to end up costing more than they bring in cost-wise, do they? Is that a decision you have to make them affordable, or is it a philosophy? Or?
Yeah, it looks like Michelle wants to jump into this as well. But,
yeah,
you go.
I was just going to say that's one of my questions in our long-term plan actually, is do we have the balance right? Because yes, there is a cost to the ratepayer for all of those facilities, and there's also a user charge. And so we're asking, do we have that balance right? Should a swimming pool, for example, be more subsidised by the ratepayer or more user pays? And it's hard to get that balance, because if you put the fees up too much, people won't be able to afford to go there. And yet it's one of those key infrastructure things that we talked about before that attracts people to this community, and it's important to have some of those facilities that are low cost or freely available to the community.
And we just need to optimise those assets, so any of the current assets or future assets, so we can get enough user charge over the counter. But a good example of your MyWays, your pools, healthcare, all those things we take for granted. Libraries, they all are subsidised services. So if you went to a fully user pays model, what does that work? What does that look like? We could have the pool as fully user pays, and it would be about $16, $17 probably per swim. Is anyone going to use it? It's going to drive a low operating model because we're going to need no staff. And the conversation to Michelle's point about getting that balance right, you go the other way and you make it free, then we're going to need more staff. Your operating model is going to increase, and so it's going to be more heavily subsidised. So the question that we're asking, I guess, through the whole LTP is, have we got the balance right? And we're pretty keen to hear from you, and you'll all have different views from whatever perspective you're coming from. Maybe you don't use a specific facility or service, but you might use another one over here, or you might have in the past and you don't use it now. But what does a community look like when you don't have libraries, you don't have pools, you don't have MyWay, and that the elderly don't have access to all the things that they need to? I don't think it works very well.
Cool. Well, we're going to take a little opportunity to take a wee break and read through some more of the questions, and we'll let Darryn go away and worry about things some more. You're a very calm man for someone with the weight of all the knowledge on you.
I'm very good at looking calm.
And thanks everyone, we'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I'll remember to turn the microphone on this time. We're going to hand the rest of the podcast over to your questions and have these poor unsuspecting councillors and mayors to talk to them. Got a few here, so we'll work through it. One is came in and has lots of likes, is about land price and rates increases. How do your rates increase in relation to new land values?
Yeah, great question. So we rate under land value. So when you get your rating revaluation through QV coming through, you have your land value and your capital value. So we're rating on your land value, but what we do is we set an overall budget first. So it's all relative to our overall budget, and then it breaks down to land properties. Where someone might get a spike is if they've had a significant increase in value, and sometimes there are anomalies across different land, possibly sometimes in different sectors, and that can affect rural communities. Sometimes, dairy land versus rural, that sort of thing. But so it's all relative to your overall budget. So it's not, hey, my land value's gone up by 30%. That doesn't mean that your rates are going to go up cumulatively.
Because I guess you wouldn't need to put through a rates increase every year if it just rose with the tide.
No, that's all right. Yeah, we'd have more money in our budget if we just went on QVs. Yeah.
Cool. We've got Tamuka question.
Oh, good.
We have submissions to that. Does the council really believe that shutting off a walkway and entrance by Tamuka Pharmacy will bring more people to the main street?
That's part of a project that came out of the strategic plan that the Tamuka Community Board have worked on for the last few years with the community input. And so what we're planning there, the idea was to try and link the Bowen Street car park with King Street and Tamuka. And so the shutting off is just a trial at this point in time, and whether we in the long term want to close it off to traffic. But the idea in there is we're going to create a Legends lane with Tamuka Legends, as we're calling them, and we're working on that at the moment, and so we want to enhance that area, put some paint on the walls, put up some picture boards. We want to make it a little bit quirky and interesting, and try and attract people to go and have a look at that, and hopefully then carry on into the main street. It's just over in Hokitika in the weekend, and they've got a fantastic laneway similar that connects their main street with the beach. It's really looks good, and it looks like somewhere you want to walk down.
Yeah, for a small town, it's quite challenging getting people to kind of turn off the highway. And Tamuka, it's a very binary decision as well. It's an unusual town in that regard.
It is. We're talking about some extra signage and things like that. I always say you stop in a small town to go to the toilet or get a coffee. And so we can kind of put some signage on that main highway that will people know that there's a toilet there, you can stop. Yes, you do have to then walk into the main street to use it, but we're kind of hoping that it might get a few more people stopping. But it's also actually about the people who live in Tamuka as well, and just making it a more attractive and place that people want to spend time in their main street.
And I guess that specific concept is quite local pride based. It's celebrating what is Tamuka.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I put a post up on the Tamuka Community Facebook page about the Legends Lane, and got some great feedback on who might qualify as a local legend. So it's been great. It's been fascinating. Yeah, and it's got quite a lot of community buy-in. Yeah.
Is there a Legends Appreciation Board or something? Who gets this final choice?
Yeah, I know. We're talking about that. We've got a few different ideas on how we might decide. And actually, we're thinking we might have a living local legend that we change on a regular basis, which, because if we can change it up, you then don't just go, I've looked at it once, I don't need to go again. So trying to make it, interesting.
Got a few roundabout questions.
Yeah.
Do we have a record number of roundabouts in the country now? Because we've had a few pop up. It's kind of an interesting story about how roundabouts are funded, because you can't just spend them on other improvements, can you?
No, that's it. And I think that's the education pieces. I think council has full discretion on where we can invest this money, but just to explain it really simply is that council, we fund 50% of the local roads, and we get 51% technically through a financial assistant rate through Wakakatahi or NZTA. We also spend money over and above that. With the roundabouts and some of those safety improvements, it comes or did come in a certain bucket of money, and we got a higher subsidy, so we would often only have to put 10% of local money in. So those things are identified. Very often it's actually community up, because it's built around decisions on putting a roundabout can be around crashes, safety of pedestrians, all sorts of things. And no, we're not paying 100% of that. We're getting significant subsidy in from central government as well. Yeah.
And how does the community go about improving the safety in the locality? I've got one question here about Edward Street, so I'm asking for a speed bump. Do they approach us and do they get in touch? Because we do hold a lot of data on these things, don't we?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, look, in the first instance, ring the council, you can ring elected member as well, touch base. Where you've got a concern, we can put speed monitoring and those sorts of things out, just to understand the amount of traffic, what sort of speeds traffic is travelling at on those specific roads. So we've got all the tools, and we can just work you through a process and work with community members where they've had some results and changes. But we do need that data before we go in and put in a speed limit, because it will affect lots of different things happening on different streets.
I was just going to add to that, in the areas where there's a local community board, we quite often have people come along to the meetings. We have a public forum at the start of the meetings, and quite often have people come along and share their ideas. We were at the cave the other week, and they have exactly the issue with some speeding along the front of the pub there, and so it was good to hear their concerns, and quite often some of the senior leadership team are there and will take what they hear on board and do exactly what me and Nigel has just said, and look at putting a trial in there, counting traffic and speeds and monitoring. It's good.
One challenge we have is that we don't control all the roads. Say you have the highway running through Pleasant Point and Temuka, there's the highway running right through Timaru. What control does council have over these things?
I guess the best way I'd describe it is where you have an advocacy role. State highways are state highways. The one good thing about them is it's taxpayer money versus ratepayer money funding them. Are they funded to the appropriate level? I would argue that they're not, but a great example is the state highway through Timaru at the moment. North out to Washdyke. It's been an interesting state to be delight for some years. We know Katahi or NZTR are investing in a solution, but it is frustrating for anyone that uses that road, and it's taken a long time. So we do continue to advocate and to find solutions in that. They have their own challenges as well. So it's easy to pass blame, but there's some other things. We've upgraded water mains in that space, so we need to work with those parties to make sure we time investment, so we're not doing it in 1 year and then have to re-dig up the road and those sort of things. So another great example is the one lane of the Rari bridge, which is really important for that community and was important for the South Island back in that 2019 flood. It's a state highway. We continue to advocate for it. I think if that was a council-owned bridge, it would probably be done by now, but it's not. And the problem is, we can't invest that money because we'll never get it back. Yeah.
And I guess that's the benefit of local government versus national government, is they look at the big picture and we get to be wholly self-interested in these things.
Yeah, very much so. Look, and I think this isn't passing blame on any particular government, but I think the previous government and the current government, similar priorities around where investment is going, and I think there's a fair argument that the Canterbury, South Island as a whole is probably missing out on some of that investment. So from that local point of view, we know we've got from Terra Factory delivering a lot of GDP, great flow-on effect, local employment, but servicing farm, etc. We've got some big trucking companies, the Hiltons and the Temukas. They're all using our roads. They're paying significant money in road users. The question I ask government, are we getting that investment back to the level that we need to? One of the things that, one of the metrics around how funding is allocated is not economic activity, and so we need to continue to advocate for more investment back to where that the economic that economic activity has occurred. So there's ongoing challenges. As we all know, the government's got challenges, so there's no mystery bucket of money sitting out there that we're just going to be able to tap in and fix every pothole overnight.
There's not even much roundabout funding anymore, is there?
No. Change though, the roundabouts have probably dried up for a while, I would imagine. Yeah.
And you can't underestimate the importance of roads, and like all the things that get the headlines are the big community facilities, but roads are the lifeblood of what we do.
I often use the Temuka Ewan Road, which was recently upgraded, as a classic example, because everyone will complain, and rightly so sometimes, if their road's in a rough state, or there's potholes or things like that, but you never drive down a really good road like that one is now and go, wow, this is amazing, do you? You just don't notice it, you take it for granted, but there's been huge investment in our roads, but you don't notice it.
Yeah, I think people don't understand how good some of our roads are, relative to other parts of the country. And probably just to segue a little bit, one of the things that's driving some of our rate increases, that cost of that increase in infrastructure, road costs over the last 3 years, I think 27-28% increases. So we can't compare some of our costs to that, just basic inflationary rates. Some of our costs have increased over and above that. Our bridges over the last 3 years, and I talked about we've got significant investment in that space, increased over 3 years 38%. Wastewater 30%. Some significant costs driving the numbers for us.
Is it a challenge being the councillors that are left holding the baby on this one, that just as you guys are in office, all this infrastructure suddenly needs replaced?
I'd say every council has its challenges, they're just different challenges. And you can't, you can't, it is what it is. We're just in a moment of time where infrastructure needs replacing. The next council will be a different issue, the previous councils, it was different issues.
Yeah, look, and I think what's been great about this whole process is just that education on the challenges and the age of some of our infrastructure. And we talked about the Rangatata Bridge and some of that critical infrastructure to our north. It's all 80 odd years old. There's lots of investment that's needed. We need more funds to flow back to local economies.
So when we were building these things back in the days, we were actually a lot more leveraged than we are now.
Yeah, apparently LGNZ did some work on that, and they were up to 500% of their income at the time. But they were probably faster growing communities. They stayed leveraged for a very long time, and then had a plan to repay that debt. And personally, it's not the amount of debt that worries me, it's having a plan to repay it.
Someone's come up with a slightly contentious, and from sitting in the chamber it's been quite a contentious question about rubbish bins. Are you going to reinstate at least some rubbish bins around the district, or what's this kind of approach that was taken in this regard?
Yeah, so I'd say we got a little bit of a blind side of that one ourselves, to be perfectly honest. And so one of the things that we've talked about is how do we better inform, and I think some of the stuff's really good on the website and on different parts of council, and it's about telling the public about the 3 months ahead what's happening in that space. And so we've got phone calls to understand that rubbish bins have been taken away, and there's two ways of looking at it. Hey, being more responsible, take the rubbish home. I think there's an element of that, but there's also a question for ourselves: have we got this right? If we're just trying to drive costs down, a good example is Auckland Council removed a lot of rubbish bins to save a considerable amount of money. But is there a different way of delivering a service? We contract it out at the moment. Can we be delivering some of these services ourselves? If you look at the success of Seaplay, the problem with the success of that is we need to take the rubbish away more often. So those successful projects come with an operating model that isn't always easy to fund. And so we need to be more innovative on how we do that. But we recognise that as a challenge for people. When I go walk the dog, I'm seeing where a rubbish bin was, and some dog poo bags and what have you as well. So we're seeing that in our community. So look, we need to do more work in that space.
Talking about changes in sort of levels of service, someone's talking about weed spraying and unhappy at that level of service and things. Have you been looking at that sort of thing over the past while?
Yeah.
It's definitely your question.
Yeah, we have been looking at some of that for the sort of last couple of years, and so we've had a contracted model since 1992, and we are just going through a review and how we deliver those parks and rec services, and we are heading towards more of an in-house model, at least a hybrid model, where we can have more control over some of those elements of the service. And I've certainly been unhappy myself, and I think we can do a lot better on some of that, and recognise that there's some challenges, and we I don't want to just say it's a work in progress, because that is the reality, but we are looking to be able to get a more efficient system and also maintain and increase the level of service.
I think that probably raises quite an important point that we've been trying to make through this LTP is it's not just all the infrastructure and capital projects that are driving some of the increase in rates, it's actually operation costs as well, and if we can look at how we deliver some of them and gain some efficiencies, we'll also have some wins as well. So this is not just big capital projects, it's just how much it costs to do business, like empty rubbish bins, spray weeds and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's just to reiterate that point, it's this is very much around, yes, what we're expending now, both in OPEX and capital, but it doesn't take into account what we're reviewing as far as the way we deliver our service, and we are doing a lot of work in that space, which I think the community would welcome.
Because the big ticket items, from right here, have less of an effect on your rates bill than what we do every day, those emptying the bins and that sort of thing.
It does really, because those bigger assets, you spread the cost of them over the life of the asset, so all generations pay for that. And so yes, generally they have it, you can borrow money, there's a cost of interest, of course, that needs to be funded, and what we really need to be doing is getting to a point where we're depreciating and saving that depreciation fully on those assets, so when they need to be replaced, there's some reserves there, or that money's used to repay debt.
It's a very unsexy decision to make, that one, isn't it? Putting money aside for a rainy day.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, but it's so important, and I think my understanding is that councils weren't regulated, did not have to do that until the late 80s, early 90s. And
2002.
Oh, 2002
yeah.
Was it? Yeah, and so up until that time, they weren't putting their money away for a rainy day, which is, that's nobody's fault, that was just how it was done at the time. But that has added to, that plus the age of the infrastructure and the increase in operating costs is just a perfect storm.
And probably just to explain depreciation, a lot of people just think in a business sense, and where you, it's effectively an expense you're, taking off your accounts effectively, so you're using it to drive profit, but it's not the case for council. We're actually putting that money aside to renew the asset. So every dollar that we put away into a depreciation fund every year is then spent back on renewal and capital expenditure. I hope I've got that. Shall we jump in?
No, that's
but I think it's an important
that
one.
Is the basic part of it,
yeah.
but the challenge with that is you actually have to be breaking even to be saving
Yes.
that depreciation. If
Yeah.
you're making a loss, you're not saving that depreciation. That's my only
No,
clarification there.
Very good.
When it comes to all those fixing and repairing the building, how does the council support local industry to do things? Because we are a big procurer of services from local communities, aren't we?
Yeah, look, this is something we talk about all the time. It sits within our procurement policy. I think we can still do more in that space. Overall, we spend a significant amount back into local. Most people will understand that there's a multiplier effect, sort of between 2 and 4 times if we can have that investment back into local. There are some procurement policies that sit with the likes of our NZTA funding that we have to put it out to full market, but where possible we like to drive local. Are we doing it perfectly? No. Can we do it better? Yes, and there's a real drive from the members to make sure we get that right.
Cycling questions. Someone really likes the current path that goes from Spazzalasa Park out to Wilby Cave at some point in the near future. Is there any sort of appetite or interest in bringing that into Timaru or to Tuga?
I definitely think there's an appetite and an interest. It's the funding is the issue. You know, that Central South Island one has been a great success story where something's been driven, you know, locally outside of council. C plays another example. The Fraser Park redevelopment's another example where council can support, but they're driven outside of council. I think, am I right in saying a lot of that funding around cycleways has now dried up? And so it will be a challenge, yes.
Yeah, a lot of that funding, just so people understand, council in the last long-term plan put $100,000 per year for support of those joint trails, but it's been used mainly for cycle trails. So that Central South Island trail has got some of that money. The other one that's you know, just opened now down at Seneca is the pump track. So there is money continually over the next sort of 7 years that sits in there for that activity, and it's around that enablement. So the cost of those, as Michelle sort of pointed out, has been largely funded by NZTA, and with, you know, change of government, change of priority, the funding streams aren't there as much. But if people are interested in you know, projects, there are different buckets of money within the council that can help support those.
Because a lot of these are very community-driven projects, like track walls, Central South Island boundary walls, seaplay walls. Is it important that council doesn't always have to take the lead on these things?
I think that is what makes a community, to be honest. It's not council's role to deliver everything in our community, and where community organisations, you know, they just have more passion and more drive to get it done, and we can assist with funding. I think it is a great model.
The community has a great ability to pick up the slack and drive some of these things where, you know, it's a lot easier for communities sometimes than council, so we're keen to support any of those innovative ideas, and I think it's a great model.
And they often can get access to other funding that council can't always access, you know, with charitable organisations and community grants and things like that.
See, we've got a fan of invisible infrastructure here. As you see very well, it says, really proud of the new Geraldine siphon being installed. Great luck team.
That's great.
Yeah, well, was David Seymour mentioned recently, sorry to quote one particular politician, but I did laugh at this one, you know, no mayor's ever had a photograph taken, you know, cutting a ribbon on a sewer pipe or water pipe. So, you know, that's the reality of it, and that, you know, speaks to probably our plan and our delivering and focus on those core activities, which is, you know, 80% of our infrastructure spend over the next 10 years.
Some of these questions are quite operational, so you might not answer them, but someone's saying, why does it cost $400 for a LIM report when it's stuff that's already been done for someone else in the past usually?
Yeah, I'll have a crack at that one. I think there's two things I'll say about this. I think there is a legal reason why LIM reports must be prepared for the person using them outside my pay rate, but I think that's one reason, because I've had that answer given to me by our own lawyers before. And I also understand that it's one area we're looking at developing a new system in, so it's more efficient in the future, so we may see some change there.
Yeah, one of our projects is to try and automate and drive efficiency in this one, and again, that's one of the steps we can take to increase efficiency, isn't it? And sort of drive down the cost of the place. Yeah, 100%, and that's a great piece of work, and it's going to make it a lot easier for people moving forward to access that service. The questions have dried up. When will something be done about abandoned houses around Timaru? You spotted a number of abandoned houses.
Well, I've been made aware of two. So, you know, council's role sits in a couple of places with abandoned houses. So it's when you know, it's unsafe to the public, and also I think it's under health. So, you know, if there's you know, rat and vermin activity, etc., then council can jump in, and or if there's you know, concern for safety. You know, I think it's under the Building Act, I believe, and so you know, if it's a dangerous building, that you know, more likely on the, you know, public you know, footpath or something. But unfortunately, and you know, it's the wonderful thing. You know, you live in New Zealand, we champion our property rights, and people expect council to be able to do something for everyone, but we can't because it's private property rights. It's the same with conversations around control of cutting trees and things like that. There's only so much we can do.
Here's an interesting one. In a small region, how does council deal with conflict of interest arising when it comes to doing contracts? Because everyone knows everyone that knows everyone.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty good at that. I mean, obviously we've got some legal requirements around making sure not just councillors but council officers as well have declared all your conflicts for a start, and it's up to individual councillors, and I think we're all pretty good at it, and just not being part of that conversation or decision, stepping out of the room or stepping aside. Definitely, I know in tenders and procurement, it's happened before where people will just say, I know that person, or I've got a conflict there, so I can't be part of that meeting. So,
Yeah.
But you're right, small town, there's conflicts everywhere.
Yeah, and you're not going to avoid conflicts, but it's how you manage them. It's up to us as individuals, and certainly if there's someone forgets to declare a conflict, you'll certainly get a steer from another elected member. So I think what's interesting around the transparency of it is a lot of this goes in behind the scenes, and people actually don't see what we've declared and how we manage that. And so when we get to a point of a decision, as an example, we're just not involved, or if there's contracts or something, we're not a part of that. So there's very clear guidelines, and the staff are really good at helping support us with that.
Someone says, stop wasting money on companies that can't fix a pothole.
Susie has a great answer for that. She says often it is just a temporary fix because that's all that's available resource-wise to get done. Is like putting a band-aid over it, knowing that when we've got the budget and the equipment and the resources to do it, they'll come back and do a proper repair. So I agree. It can be frustrating, but it is a band-aid until we can fix the problem longer term.
And the onus often with most of those sits on the contractor to fix it, so it's not council paying every time someone comes out to refix that pothole. Yeah.
And works that need rework afterwards, those are at the expense of the contractor as well.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
I think we're coming to the end of the evening. We're all getting tired. Do you have any final comments to make? You're going into the end of this thing, and then in late May you'll be deliberating, and you'll be going through the all the submissions that come in and seeing what happens, and then you've got until the end of June to adopt it and start again. Is it trepidation? Is it excitement? What do you feel going into this? Don't have to do another one of these Facebook Lives.
No, look, it's a great opportunity for people to ask questions. From me, we've got a couple of days left. Submission close at 5 p.m. on Sunday. We've still got another drop in at Darryn tomorrow afternoon, I think 1 to 3 at the Library Service Centre, down at the markets in Timaru, Saturday morning, 9 to sort of 12:30ish. Roughly, if there's something specific, it doesn't have to be a long-term plan, it can be anything that matters to you, come have a chat. Through this process we've made all our contacts very available, our cell phone numbers, email addresses. If you want to reach out to an elected member, please do so. We won't bite, we're keen to have a chat. You can have a chat on anything. We're invested as you are in making this community great. So please take the time. If you don't make a submission, that's fine. We'd love to read your submissions. It's a great opportunity to get in front of all elected members, but equally so, we're here to serve you. You elected us. We're keen to work on your behalf, so please reach out.
Yep. And we've had a few more comments in the questions in the comments. We've not been able to answer tonight, but we'll get staff to answer those in due course. Some of them are quite operational that you guys don't have a clue about.
No, what are you saying? Haven't tested? No.
So everyone can have their say at timaru.govt.nz/LTP. So you've only got till Sunday to join the conversation, so get on and have your say. So thanks to the councillors, thanks to Darryn, who's run away to fix something hopefully, and thanks to all of you for watching. Good night.
Thank you.